Good evening, I'm John Batchelor. This is the John Batchelor Show, the second presidential debate we will discuss this evening. In the course of the debate, which was directed chiefly at an American audience about American concerns, there was mention of foreign policy quandaries. Syria came up. ISIS came up. Al-Qaeda did not, to my hearing. Perhaps it was mentioned quickly by the moderator or in some fashion was passingly mentioned, but Al-Qaeda did not come up directly. Al-Qaeda is a growing concern, and Tom Jocelyn and Bill Roggio of the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies very carefully watch Al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda is the mothership. ISIS is a sub-tribe. And we're going to start with ISIS right now tonight because the sub-tribe, this group calling itself ISIS, which was collected, we believe, out of the remains of the Iraqi resistance back in 2013, 2014, can date back perhaps to 2011, not much before that. The Islamic State has been capturing all the attention headlines around the world, and its narrative is that it's growing, that it's spreading throughout the world. Well, Tom Jocelyn has a stat tonight that doesn't support that, and it needs interpretation. Tom, a very good evening to you. Suicide attacks claimed by the Islamic State in September. What does this tell us, and how do you read it? Good evening to you.
Well, good evening, John. Well, you know, it's interesting. The Islamic State puts out these infographics on the number of suicide bombings carried out by their members in Iraq, Syria, and Libya every month. And so they put out these infographics for readers and for true believers to sort of follow what the group's doing. And actually, the infographics throughout the course of this year document a stunning growth in their martyrdom cult. They have launched, according to their own statistics, 782 suicide attacks in 2016 alone through the end of September. What's interesting, however, about the latest one for the month of September is that it shows that according to their own statistics, the number of suicide attacks has now gone down to 53 for September. Now, this is still a lot, historically speaking, but to put it in some perspective, they claimed 119 suicide attacks in the month of May alone. So it's interesting, and we don't know really what much to make of it in the long run. We're going to see if they're going to try and restart and launch even more martyrdom attacks in October. But the bottom line is that this shows that they're not able at this point to sort of keep their sort of trend line going up in terms of the martyrdom attacks.
This would be consistent with other reporting from many directions that the Islamic State has been on the decline in certain areas, and that there's been an indication of either exit from the battlefield or fighters just missing. They can't find them anywhere. So that would match up with a decline in Syria, Raqqa, and in Mosul. But from this graphic, I can't tell whether there's a decline in those areas. They list this in Arabic, and I don't have the Arabic to solve what they're pointing to, Tom.
Yeah, well, I've got it translated. We worked on it. They are down in both Iraq and Syria. I mean, I think the bottom line, the way to look at this is, you know, Bill and I talk about this all the time. There's an ebb and a flow to the fight. You know, there's no question that since 2013, the Islamic State busted on the scene and grew internationally at a very rapid rate, and really expanded the number of people who were willing to become martyrs for the cause. Of course, at the same time, as I caution in the piece of the Long War Journal, some of these so-called martyrs are actually children or adolescents who were pressed into battle and forced to blow themselves up. So that's not somebody we would consider a real martyr, of course. But by the same token, these statistics, if they are accurate, and they can't be independently verified, although we find them to be generally consistent with the scale of the fighting, shows that martyrdom cult that the Islamic State banks on has grown quite a bit over the last few years. And just to put it in perspective, John, I'll give you one stat. So the State Department every year comes out with statistics that they rely on to show you the number of suicide attacks per month and then throughout the course of the year. All terrorist organizations around the globe in 2015 executed an average of 61 terrorist attacks, suicide attacks. These are just suicide bombings now, not total attacks, just suicide bombings. 61 per month in 2015. So far in 2016, the Islamic State is claiming 87 per month by itself every month. So this in 2015 was the historical high in suicide attacks. Now remember, John, this whole thing was kicked off by the 9/11 attacks, which of course are the most infamous suicide bombings or hijackings of all time. And so this is what they consider martyrdom operations. And in 2001, the total number of suicide attacks around the globe was about 50 some odd attacks, just where you have these so-called martyrs. The Islamic State, even in September, which was a low for them in 2016, exceeded that in September by itself. So this still shows you the scale of the threat has really grown overall. But of course, Al-Qaeda has grown as well. It's not just the Islamic State.
Bill, a very good evening to you. We go to the Taliban boasting, and this boasting is consistent with other reporting you have done, that the Taliban is operating effectively and without much risk in Kunduz, Baghlan, and Helmand province. What are they bragging about now? Good evening to you, Bill.
Good evening, John. Yes, the Taliban issued yet another videotape of one of its training camps, and the really interesting thing to me about this video, well, several things, but the first is, as the Taliban are on the offensive in multiple provinces in Afghanistan, they have really ramped up their propaganda operations as well. They're issuing videotapes of training camps, of their overrunning district centers and conducting operations throughout Afghanistan. And in this particular video, the Taliban are not very subtle about its place in the global jihad. You have several of its commanders saying that the Taliban is, part of the global jihad. They're not explicitly saying it, but they're saying, look, Muslims from across the world should be fighting for the Ummah, which is the global community. We're running training camps, and we hope you come here. And then at one point, you even have an unnamed fighter who's not a commander, but he is, this is all translated into English, by the way, and he's saying, look, we're going to attack you in the United States and in the West. So, the Taliban have played this game for years, where in the English language media, they basically said, oh, no, our jihad is only for our country, and we're not interested in harming our neighbors, and it's all propaganda. But what they actually are saying behind, or when they say it, they have it out in Urdu or Arabic or in Persian, and now even in the English, stating that yes, part of this global jihad.
Bill, the quality of the video is very good. From the clips that you provide. Very good video, and clearly somebody's been to school to learn how to do this. The uniforms don't look all that impressive, and we are looking at, it's always puzzled me why they wear masks, Bill. We don't care what they look like. We're not liable to do a police arrest of people out in the outback in Helmand province, so it's odd they want to wear masks. But in any event, this reminds me of some of the training films we've had from the Islamic State in Syria in its early days. So maybe there's a competition between cutthroat tribes as to who has the best video.
This, you nailed it, John. This video was the most slickly produced video I've seen the Taliban put out to date. It's produced by the Haqqani Network's media arm. Look, we all know the Haqqanis are close to both Al-Qaeda as well as Pakistan's ISI. So if they want, they have the resources to put together better propaganda. And I think that we're going to see more of videos like this, with, again, more slickly produced, more meaningful. And I think the fact that the Haqqanis are producing this as well is why the whole message of, their participation, being more of a global group, is going to come out.
We are speaking of Taliban videos in Afghanistan, and Tom was pointing to a metric of suicide bombers in Syria. When we come back, we are going to Al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda operating in Syria, rebranding itself all the time, and working in the battlefield, this Syrian civil war. So we've had ISIS, we then had Taliban, and when we come back, Al-Qaeda, and we'll also speak to AQAP. That's Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula. Yemen civil war is involved with AQAP. I'm John Batchelor.